People often misunderstand this idea of what it means to be good. They think being good means being harmless, being soft, being agreeable, never causing trouble. But that's wrong. That's not goodness. That's weakness. And weakness is not virtue. Virtue is not the absence of the capacity for harm. It's having that capacity and choosing not to use it except when it's necessary. See, the hero, the genuine hero, is not a harmless creature. The hero is dangerous. The hero is disciplined power. The hero is someone who's capable of great destruction, great violence, great dominance, but who restrains it, channels it, masters it. That's what makes them heroic. Because if you're harmless, you're not moral, you're just incapable of doing anything else. And that's why the hero has to be a monster. You take a young man, for instance, he's told all his life that aggression is bad, that ambition is bad, that striving for power or strength is somehow toxic. So he suppresses all that. He buries his capacity for force, for leadership, for courage. And then what happens? He becomes resentful. He becomes weak. He becomes easily manipulated because he doesn't have a dragon in him anymore. He's lost the thing that makes him formidable. But when you awaken that, when you start to integrate that darker side, that capacity for chaos and destruction, and then you discipline it, aim it, control it, something extraordinary happens. You become someone who can stand up in the face of suffering and chaos and say, I can handle this. You become someone who can confront evil without being consumed by it. And that's the difference between the coward and the hero. The coward avoids the dragon. The hero confronts it. And in confronting it, he becomes something more than he was. That's the whole point of the archetypal hero's journey. You descend into the chaos, you confront the beast, you integrate what you learn, and then you return transformed. You bring order out of chaos. So if you want to be good, really good, you have to start by becoming dangerous. You have to learn to be a monster. Not to harm, but to be capable. Not to dominate, but to have the strength to stand up when it matters most. Because life will test you. It will throw suffering, betrayal, and tragedy in your path. And if you're harmless, you'll be crushed. But if you've developed that inner monster, if you've confronted your own chaos and disciplined it, then you can look that suffering in the eye and move forward anyway. And that's the kind of person the world desperately needs right now. Not harmless people, but strong, capable, dangerous people who voluntarily choose to do good. That's what keeps chaos at bay. That's what creates order. That's what changes the world. So don't aim to be harmless. Aim to be formidable. Aim to be dangerous. Then learn how to control it. Because when you do that, when you integrate your strength with your morality, you don't just become a good person. You become a hero. And the hero has to be a monster. People have this idea that being good means being nice, that being moral means being harmless, agreeable, compliant, never upsetting anyone, never standing up too tall, never causing waves. But that's a misunderstanding of what goodness really is. Harmlessness isn't goodness, it's merely the absence of capability. A rabbit is harmless, but it's not virtuous. It doesn't refrain from doing harm because it's good, it refrains because it can't do anything else. And if that's the model of morality you follow, you'll end up weak, resentful, and easily dominated by people who are stronger because the world doesn't reward harmlessness. The world rewards competence, strength, and the ability to act effectively when the situation demands it. Being good, truly good, means that you have power, but you've chosen to discipline it. It means you could inflict harm, but you don't. You could impose your will unjustly, but you choose restraint. Virtue requires the potential for vice, otherwise it's meaningless. You can't call someone peaceful if they're incapable of violence. You can only call someone peaceful if they're capable of immense violence, but choose not to use it except for just reasons. The same principle applies to every domain of life, whether it's in your career, your relationships, or your moral character. You don't become virtuous by being weak. You become virtuous by being strong and then controlling that strength. This is one of the most profound insights of human development and mythology. Every culture understands at some level that the hero is not a harmless creature. The hero is someone who has the power to act, who possesses potential for destruction, but who masters it. That mastery is what separates the hero from the tyrant. The tyrant is consumed by his power and uses it to dominate. The hero has just as much power but subordinates it to a higher moral principle. The difference isn't in capability, it's in discipline, in aim, in responsibility. Now, The problem is that modern culture often confuses being kind with being weak. We tell people, especially young men, to suppress their aggression, their assertiveness, their drive, because it makes others uncomfortable. But those are the very traits that, when refined, create courage, competence, and moral backbone. If you suppress them entirely, you don't get goodness, you get impotence. You get people who don't know how to say no, who don't know how to defend what's right, who crumble under pressure because they've never developed the capacity for controlled strength. To be good is to know what you are capable of, including the darker parts of your nature. It's to acknowledge that there's a capacity for cruelty, for selfishness, for destruction within you, and then to integrate that awareness so that it becomes a source of power rather than chaos. When you do that, you become dangerous, but in the right way. You become someone who others can rely on when things go wrong, someone who can stand firm in the face of disorder, someone who can protect rather than destroy. That's why the notion that goodness equals harmlessness is so destructive. It produces people who are fragile, people who can't defend themselves or anyone else. A society of harmless people is a society vulnerable to those who are not harmless. The moral individual isn't the one who never fights. It's the one who can fight but chooses to protect, to serve, to act with integrity. That's real strength. That's moral power. And it's only when you have power that your decision to do good means something. Without the capacity for harm, goodness is just another form of weakness disguised as virtue. To become a hero, you can't just reject the darker parts of yourself. You can't pretend that aggression, anger, ambition, and the drive for dominance don't exist within you. Those forces are part of the human condition. The danger lies not in possessing them, but in ignoring or repressing them. When you deny your capacity for chaos and destruction, it doesn't disappear. It festers, it twists, and it manifests in unhealthy, unconscious ways. You might think you're being moral by staying away from power, by keeping yourself safe from conflict. But in truth, you're leaving yourself unarmed, unprepared, and at the mercy of your own undeveloped instincts. The process of becoming a hero demands confrontation with that inner chaos. You have to see the monster in yourself. You have to look at the part of you capable of cruelty, of deceit, of destruction, and acknowledge that it's real. Because if you don't, you'll never understand what you're capable of, and worse, you'll project that unacknowledged darkness onto the world. You'll see evil everywhere else, but never recognize that it also lives inside you. It's only when you confront that reality that you can begin to integrate it, to transform it into disciplined strength instead of uncontrolled chaos. That's why myths and stories across cultures always portray the hero descending into the underworld or facing a dragon. The dragon represents chaos, the unknown, the monstrous aspect of existence and of the self. The hero doesn't defeat it by denying it exists. He defeats it by facing it head on, by understanding it, by mastering it. That mastery doesn't mean the darkness disappears. It means it's brought under conscious control. It becomes a source of power, not destruction. When you integrate your capacity for chaos, you gain depth. You stop being naive. You become someone who can recognize evil and stand against it. Not because you're pure, but because you've faced it within yourself. Integration makes you whole. It gives you balance. You become capable of both compassion and strength, mercy and justice, humility and courage. Without that balance, you remain incomplete, half a person, fragile and ineffective when life demands something more from you. Integration is what transforms potential destruction into purposeful power, chaos into order, weakness into resolve. Weakness doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you vulnerable, bitter, and dependent on the strength of others. When you lack the ability to act, to defend yourself, or to assert your values, resentment begins to build. You start to feel powerless, and over time that powerlessness turns into anger. But it's a poison kind of anger, an anger without direction or responsibility. It festers in silence and blames the world for being unfair, when in truth, the problem lies in your own undeveloped capacity. Weakness invites exploitation and breeds frustration because you know somewhere deep down that you could have been stronger, you could have done more, but you chose comfort over discipline. Discipline changes that equation entirely when you choose to take responsibility to build yourself up. To cultivate power and control, you stop being a victim of circumstance. You start to see the world not as a threat, but as a challenge. Discipline gives your aggression direction. It channels your impulses towards something meaningful. Instead of lashing out blindly or suppressing your strength out of guilt, You learn to use it with precision and purpose. That's what transforms raw power into responsibility. A disciplined person doesn't need to be told how to act. They already know because they've forged themselves through struggle. They've faced the temptations of laziness, cowardice, and selfishness, and they've chosen a higher aim. They've learned to delay gratification, to bear suffering voluntarily, to master themselves before trying to master anything else. That's what makes them trustworthy. It's what makes them capable of leadership. You can rely on someone who has control over their strength, but you can't rely on someone who's weak, because weakness can turn dangerous the moment resentment takes hold. Resentment in the weak often masquerades as morality. It disguises itself as compassion or fairness, but beneath it lies envy and helplessness. The disciplined, on the other hand, don't need to disguise their motives. Their strength speaks for itself. They don't seek control through manipulation, they earn it through competence. They understand that responsibility is the antidote to resentment, and power used in service of what's good is not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be pursued, because only those who are capable of power can bear the moral weight of choosing not to misuse it. Every person carries within them a shadow, a part of their nature they'd rather not see. It's that part that's capable of envy, cruelty, cowardice, and deceit. Most people spend their lives running from it, pretending that it doesn't exist, clinging to the illusion of innocence. But there's no growth in denial. The process of transformation begins when you stop running and start facing that inner monster, when you turn toward the darkness and decide to understand it instead of fearing it. That confrontation is terrifying because it reveals who you really are, your weaknesses, your temptations, your hidden desires, but it's also the only way to gain courage. You can't call yourself brave if you've never faced what frightens you most, and that includes yourself. When you face the monster within, you stop projecting it onto the world. You stop seeing your fears and hatreds in others, and instead you begin to recognize your own capacity for both good and evil. That recognition humbles you. It strips away self-righteousness and forces you to acknowledge that you are not purely good or purely bad, but a complex mixture of both. From that humility, true courage emerges. You stop trying to appear perfect and start striving to become honest, strong, and responsible. Transforming fear into courage is an act of integration. You take what once terrified you, the capacity for harm, the chaos of emotion, the darkness of potential, and you bring it under control. It becomes part of you, but not your master. You gain the strength to face suffering, to endure loss, to stand up for truth even when it costs you. Courage doesn't mean you're unafraid. It means you've made peace with your fear and learned to act in spite of it. Every hero's story reflects this transformation. The descent into darkness, the battle with the monster, the return with new wisdom. It's a map of psychological growth. When you emerge from that battle, you carry something valuable. You're not naive anymore. You're tempered like steel forged in fire. The same part of you that once could have destroyed you now becomes the source of your purpose and strength. You learn that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the mastery of it through confrontation and integration. The world doesn't need more harmless people. It doesn't need people who avoid conflict, who stay silent in the face of wrongdoing, or who retreat whenever life demands strength. What the world needs are people who are dangerous but disciplined. People who have the power to act, to defend, to build, and to protect, but who choose to use that power responsibly. True morality doesn't come from weakness, it comes from strength voluntarily restrained. The person who could harm but chooses not to is far more trustworthy than the one who's simply incapable of harm. The world is full of chaos, corruption, and suffering, and only those who possess real strength can confront it without being destroyed by it. Being dangerous in the right way means developing yourself into someone capable of bearing responsibility. It means cultivating competence, courage, and conviction. It's about becoming someone who can look at the darkness in the world and say, I'll stand against that, not because you're fearless, but because you're prepared. Dangerous people who choose good are the stabilizing force that keeps society from descending into disorder. They are the ones who build families, defend values, and act as the moral backbone of their communities. Harmless people can't do that because they crumble under pressure. They lack the fortitude to confront what's truly evil. When you become dangerous, you also become free. You're no longer controlled by fear or by the opinions of others because you've built something unshakable within yourself. You can act with integrity even when it costs you. You can face hostility without resentment. You can bear pain without bitterness. That's what separates a weak person pretending to be good from a strong person who truly is. Strength gives you the capacity to make moral choices that actually matter. Without it, your goodness is just fragility waiting to break. The people who change the world for the better are never harmless. They're capable of immense power, intellectual, physical, moral. But they've chosen a higher path. They've decided that their strength belongs to something beyond themselves. The world depends on such people, those who know what they could be if they surrendered to chaos, but choose instead to bring order, discipline, and good into a world that desperately needs it.